To begin with, we also need to understand what is microeconomics and macroeconomics. At the beginning, I was giving you the example of individual households. Microeconomics is that study of economics where the behavior of individual decision-making units, is examined. It could be a household, it could be a single business firm. For example, how does one TCS behave? Will be microeconomics. But how does the entire IT industry behave? Would probably be a part of macroeconomics. But when IT industry is taken as an individual contributor in the entire GDP of the country, then IT industry behavior will become microeconomics. So this relationship will keep changing. What is the unit? What is the single unit being examined? That micro and macro will keep changing in terms of the context. But the smallest unit of micro would be individual households and individual firms. Then you move on to macroeconomics. Macroeconomics is that stream of economics which deals with the economy as a whole. It examines the behavior of economic aggregates such as aggregate income, aggregate consumption, investment and overall level of prices. For example, inflation, deflation, interest rates, unemployment, how the society as a whole is behaving will be certain things that you will study as a part of macroeconomics. Aggregate behavior itself refers to all the behavior of the households and firms combined together. The three market arenas, household, firms, the government and the rest of the world interact in three different market arenas. One, the example which I have spoken to you about, the retailer arena, for example, the goods and services market is one. Second is the labor market, which is the employment, the wages, salary, etc., contract, etc. And then one is the money or the financial market. Now, what's the differences here? The household and the government will purchase goods and services and demand from the firm in the goods and services market. In the labor market, the firms and the government will purchase labor from household, which will be the suppliers here. So the household becomes the supplier in the labor market. In the goods and services market, the firm becomes a supplier. Then you have the total supply of labor in the economy will depend on the sum of decisions made by the households themselves. Then you have the third market arena, which is the money market, sometimes also called the financial market. Now, what does this do? The households will invest in this particular market. For example, I may be buying some shares or equity from the money market, which in turn is again going back to the organization as input for their capital. So, households supply funds to this market in expectation of earning certain income or interest or certain returns and also funds from the market. Firms and the government, on the other hand, when they need to raise capital, for example, very recently, you had a national highway bond coming up, which is a 10-year bond. So what is this? This is government borrowing. Who is the government borrowing? The government is borrowing from us. What is this interaction here? We become the supplier of capital to the government. This is the money market, how it behaves. So there are three distinct markets which we need to understand when we try and understand economics: goods and services, labor market and the money market. And they will constantly be interacting with each other. Every player will have, the same individual will have a different role in the labor market, will have a different role in the consumer market, will have a different role in the money market. And this role will forever be changing depending on which side of the fence you are. Now we come to the methodology that we use for macroeconomics. Now, the connection of macroeconomics to microeconomics at any point of time cannot be neglected, simply because it's the sum aggregate behavior. So what is the behavior? Macroeconomic is the sum of all microeconomic decisions made by the individuals and households and the firms. We cannot understand macroeconomics without having the knowledge of the factors of microeconomics first. Let us try and analyze the relationship between demand and supply and how does it give us the price point. Now, if you look at it very simply through an example point of view, usually if you see for any particular product, if the demand is very high, the prices usually escalate up. For example, gold, forever escalating. But for example, in certain cases where the supply is higher than demand, the prices usually drop. For example, certain fruits and vegetables during the peak season vis-a-vis the off season. When you look at mangoes in the month of July, the price per kg of a mango would be much lesser in a month of July vis-a-vis the price of a per kg mango in a November, right? Where the supply of mango is extremely limited. This is the relationship between supply and demand, and this is how it influences prices. Now, just to go back to the definition here, aggregate demand is the total demand for goods and services in an economy. Aggregate supply is the total supply of goods and services in an economy. Though the graph here which I have presented is very simple, the actual supply curves and demand curves behave very, very erratically for every class of goods. For example, if you look at milk, okay, milk is almost a homogeneous product. Whether you buy a Britannia milk or a Nestle milk or a Mother Dairy milk, the milk is actually the same product. There's no differentiation in the product as such. It's just branding and advertising which is actually trying to influence the demand curve here. Similarly, if you look at gold, a Tanishq gold is almost the same as the Gitanjali gold. Again, the branding and the advertising is trying to influence the demand curve. This is the constant practice of entire household. All the household will be influenced by the organizations using certain tools to increase the demand pattern here. Okay? Thus, the relationship of supply and demand keeps changing by the class of the product or even the organization for that matter. Okay? Then the expansion and contraction of the business cycle itself. Now, an expansion by definition is a boom. Is when the cycle has gone higher up. It's at the peak. So this is the period of the business cycle from a trough to a peak during which the output and the employment are on a rise. Okay? And the contraction or the recession. For example, by definition recession would be GDP, the rate, the particular percentage by which the country is going. If quarter on quarter is lesser than the previous one, it is assumed that the country is going in a recession. That is what Europe and US is facing today. On the other hand, India still, of course, it's not the same as earlier. We still can estimate a 7% or an 8% growth, which means we are in the upside of boom. We are not at the top of our peak, but we are going towards the positive. And certain countries are going towards the negative. And again, this business cycle is always no country or no economy can forever be in a boom. Similarly, no country or economy for a very, very long period also cannot always be in a recession. Recession and contraction are aspects of a lot of functions. For example, if you look at Russia, Russia went into recession after USSR was split up from a communist country to individual democratic countries. So you had Russia, you had Ukraine, and this split had caused a recession. So the value of ruble, which was the Russian currency earlier, had plummeted. Now similarly, Germany went into recession immediately after the World War. That is because obviously its currency was completely devalued and a lot of trade embargo was there. Until the time it did not become a part, now that it's a part of a European Union, etc., etc. But just before this, if you look at early last century, it was the country which caused the World War. Thus, after that, after it lost the war, it went into recession. You know, these are certain things which are inevitable and it will happen for one reason or the other. It could be a political reason, it could be a war, it could be the general currency devaluation. For example, Zimbabwe currently is going through a series of inflationary influences called hyperinflation. Their currency is not stable at all. So the currency point, for example, the Indian currency right now vis-a-vis the dollar will fluctuate between a 49 rupees to a 52 rupees. Theirs will fluctuate between a 100 rupees to 1,000 rupees in one single day. So a lot of international trade has been stopped. So these are various reasons why your business would be in a trough and peak situation. So you will have your expansion and you will have your recession, and this is the business cycle which is inevitable. It will happen inevitably because of various reasons.